think being comfortable in what we write means that we didn't go deep enough. We didn't go deep enough. There should, and this is a general statement, so it's meant to be disagreed with if one wants to, but I do think there's a general sense that if it doesn't feel risky to write, if it doesn't feel as though when you put finger to keyboard or pen to page, that something is coming out of you that you didn't know was in you. If you don't learn something from the process of writing or from the information that you put on the page, the emotions you don't put on the page, then you should try again until that happens.
No matter where you come from or what challenges you face, remember that you have the power to transform your life. We're bringing you the most inspiring stories and voices from authors who are indeed powerful forces for the culture in their work. These interviews will keep you believing in yourself, inspire you to keep pushing forward, and most importantly, never ever stop dreaming. It's your boy Colby, and this is the Colby Culture Show. Family, welcome back to the Colby Culture Show, where we sit with the storytellers shaping the way we see ourselves, our history, and our future. I'm your host, Derek Jacoby Washington, but around here, you know me as Colby, and today's guest is one of the most arresting voices in contemporary literature. Phillip B. Williams is a poet and novelist whose language does not flinch. From Thief in the Interior to Mutiny to his sweeping debut novel, Hours, he writes with a precision and power that makes you sit up straight. His work is lyrical, confrontational, spiritual, and unafraid of the dark, yet always reaching for the light, the freedom, and the possibility underneath it all. He's a Whiting Award winner, an American Book Award winner, and a writer who refuses to make his art easy, but makes it unforgettable. And today, we get to hear the story behind the voice. Phillip, welcome to the Colby Culture Show, brother. How's it going?
That's good. Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I'm super excited about our conversation today. It's been a long time coming, so I'm excited to jump right in. So you're from Chicago, a place with grit, rhythm, contradiction, and beauty. For the people who don't know your beginnings, what shaped your relationship to language growing up? And then what made poetry feel like a place you could live?
It's a great question. I was literate relatively early, and I think it is because I have this relationship with words as sound. And so there's a kind of intuitive way that I can build into understanding what is being said and remembering words based off of like a kind of sonic value. And I think it was mostly because my mom had me hooked on phonics. And so that's just sound and seeing the patterns in the language. And I was told that phonics isn't really taught much anymore. So I don't know how the youngins learn how to read now. But it really stuck with me to have reading be to have sound be heavily involved in the way that I learn how to read. And I always have someone in the house reading and then have people encouraging me as early as first grade to continue writing because I was, writing and not knowing exactly the rules. But my first grade teacher, Mrs. Bellamy, she saw something in me and it just stuck with me from then on. And poetry stayed with me because what I thought I was doing was writing songs. I ain't gonna write no songs. I mean, maybe, but I took poetry workshops in undergrad. And again, it's all about being encouraged and having folks see into you a potential to bring something new to a genre that they've already been working in. So to have that level of faith put into me really showed me that there was a reason to keep doing what I was doing.
Yeah, yeah. And there's something striking about your early work. It's not just emotional, it's architectural. When did you realize that the way you build a poem was just as important as what you were saying in it?
Yeah, that's the conversation between craft and content. The form that something takes should be in conversation with what is being said within that form. And I knew early on that I wanted to do those kind of typographical shaped poems, but I didn't know how to do it
Yeah.
exactly. And so when people asked me how it was that I did it, I was like, I just played around with Word. I couldn't figure out the Adobe Illustrator or any of those things. They're not intuitive. And there are also people who write still in that fashion. Douglas Kearney is a huge inspiration on my own work, and he does what he calls eye weather, which is the graphical kind of shape that words take when they are crossing each other. Some are bold, some are underlined, some are in different kinds of fonts, but they're interacting as a kind of tapestry. And so the eye has to constantly try to trace where to read.
Yeah.
And those decisions bring a kind of autonomy, and it builds a great relationship between reader and writer. And so just
Yeah.
learning from that, like, how do I help guide the eye across the page? And why do I want the reader to have that kind of relationship with the text? Is it because I want them to feel the kind of anxiety that the speaker in the poem is feeling? Do I want them to feel in search of something, like emotionally a speaker might be in search of something?
Yeah.
So yeah, there's the conversation between what is the shape of the poem, what is the form that it takes, and how does that relate to what is being said?
And when your work started getting recognized, I'm talking about awards and publications, did that change the way that you saw yourself as a writer, or did you already know who you were before the world?
Yeah, I pretty much knew who I was. That's one thing that's one thing people know about me. You can you can say I can't cook, you can say I can't dress, you can't say I can't write.
Mm,
That's one thing I've always had a lot of confidence in. And in a way that, in having that kind of confidence, there's always room to grow. And I
yeah.
think that's what keeps me into writing is there's no wall. It doesn't
Mm,
just cut off. There's always something to learn, to study. There's always a challenge ahead. And so keeping that level of understanding that being a master of a craft does not mean that you don't have anything to learn. It means you understand that everything can become a lesson. So
yeah.
mastery is just the understanding that the lessons are infinite.
I love that. Let's talk mutiny for a minute.
Yeah.
Even the title feels like a declaration or a refusal to accept the stories handed to us. What
Right.
were you pushing against in that collection? And then what needed to be broken open?
Yeah, I was just mad, to be honest with you. And there were so many things to be angry about at that time. This was pre-COVID.
Mm,
'Cause I wrote or understood what I was writing in January 2020. I understood what was coming to the fore in
mm,
January 2020. 'Cause I already had poems, they were just scattered about in different files, different folders. But
mm,
at the time when I was writing those, I was in a sense of disillusionment about what poetry could do, what it was doing, and I wanted to push against all of that. I wanted to push
mm,
against also this idea that there is only one way to think about the canon and who is important in literature, who deserves to
mm,
be studied. And so a lot of what I did in Mutiny was pulled from African American diasporic spiritualities, mythical understandings, family
mm,
stories, and made those the central myths. Those are the central allusions in the book, as opposed to going to Greek mythology or Roman mythology, which is the
right.
typical go-to in Western literature. So it's like, bunk that. We're gonna do black stuff.
Yeah.
And people don't know it, they can look it up. I have a long, note section in the back with the poems that are the final poems, like final poem for the moon. I wanted to imagine what it would be like if I no longer had the ability to write about symbols that they often appear in poetry. So if I didn't have access to trees or the moon or water, and these were my last days with those
Mhm,
images, what would be my ode or my kind of goodbye poem? And so that just
mm,
made me say I have to show out in these poems because what is the idea? What is the idea of the project is you wouldn't be able to use these anymore.
yeah. Love that. Love that. So much of your work carries this type of duality. It's beauty and bruise living in the same breath. When you write into pain, is it an act of survival or is it an act of
That's a good question. I think survival is, do I have food? Do I have a place to stay? Do I have people who
mm,
love me? So what writing does, it accentuates those things. So it lets me sit in the process of understanding how I am loved, how I am
mhm,
in danger. Where can I go to be fed spiritually, biologically, it's a compass to that kind of general sense of just being alive. And what I
mm,
hope for my writing to do is to also be a compass for others who feel as though there's a kind of overwhelming sensation of just existing, right?
yeah.
So the reason why there is the bruising and also the beauty is because that's just how our lives are.
Mhm,
Always this duality and also the gray. What could be beautiful might be ugly to other folks and then vice versa. So what I want to do first and foremost for myself is to be able to draw a map where I can figure out what is the life I've been living, what are the questions that I have. I like to build
mhm,
my poems on just investigations, not really knowing what the answer is or knowing how the poems will end, rather just diving even more deeply into the mystery. And there's darkness in mystery. There's
Yeah.
joy in mystery too. But yeah, for me, it is more so just a calibration of myself as an entity in this very bizarre thing that we call life
Mhm.
in this
Mhm.
world. And language is just my go-to for that.
Yeah. Yeah, and so your novel Ours, listen, when I opened the book and realized the story that you were telling, a black town founded by a conjure woman, built by free people, wrestling with what freedom actually demands, I knew that this wasn't just a novel. It felt mythic, it felt necessary. So
Yeah.
where did this story come from? And then what were you carrying that made you say, this has to be a novel?
It wouldn't leave me alone.
Mm,
It wouldn't leave me alone. I started it in undergrad as a short story, and you see how long it got, from that. But I wanted to write this story that happened during the antebellum period, during that period of enslavement, where slavery was not the main antagonist. And so I had
mhm,
to get them in a town on their own so that they can, be balm and blade to each other, so they can love on each other and also hurt one another as we do as people. And so it was a way to, I don't necessarily like the word, this idea of humanizing, but it's a way to add the complexity to those who, were enslaved or never been enslaved, but they're learning how to be free together,
mhm,
regardless of their backgrounds. And my mom, she was reading earlier versions of the novel because we only had that one computer was hers, and I can't
mhm.
tell her not to read something on her computer, and so she would
Right.
open the file and be reading, the draft, and I had stopped working on it. I just didn't have I was out of gas. I had
Mhm.
nothing left, and she was like, "Where's the rest of the book?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" So, having her in my ear was really the most inspiration to keep me going because I hadn't given up on it, but I didn't know how to get back into it. And every
Yeah.
time I would start and write something, because the ideas are so vast and there's so much ground covered, and I was young too, I would get intimidated, I would get lost in my own work. So it took me
Mhm,
getting older, and it took me finally just surrendering to my mom's voice and be like,
mhm.
okay, we can do this.
Yeah. Mom is like, I wanna know what happens next.
Yeah, she wanted to know what happens next, and she would not for years, she kept asking me over and over again,
Wow.
"How's the novel? How's the novel?" I'm like, "I'm working on it. I'm working on
Mhm.
it."
So fiction gave you a type of bigger canvas, but did
Mhm.
it also give you a different kind of responsibility, a responsibility to character, to history, or even to
Mhm.
community?
Responsibility, a different responsibility. Maybe, or it's the same responsibility, but what it allowed me to do was engage with how to hold myself accountable to others in a different way. I think
Mhm,
fiction often comes with the expectation of a kind of ease, and I don't write easy stuff.
mhm.
That's just not the way my mind works, and I'm not interested in reading stuff like that, so I don't create in that way. I believe that the reason why so much of what we create, be it through Baldwin Morrison, XX Hemphill, whatever, is because they were challenged and they had people who challenged them through language, through ideas, through scholarship, through art. And I find that to be a way that we evolve our minds is through constant pushing and being challenged and being made uncomfortable by the things that we read. And, it's not just a lately thing, but for a while now, there's been a big resistance to things that are hard. And I think it tunnels into our insecurities, it tunnels into our traumatic upbringing in schools where we're not considered smart, we're not treated as though we're valuable as children. And that comes up in reading. People don't want to read things that they have to really think hard about. They want to
Yeah,
be entertained and they want constant joy. And, it's a response to our times. People just want to chill, but we can't chill in everything that we do.
yeah,
And that kind of over facilitation, that kind of ease, it really does eat away at our imaginations, at our minds, at our problem solving, at our empathy. And so, yeah, for me, I still want to always write work that is intense, that needs to be wrestled with and sat with. And this is not to say that work that doesn't do that or doesn't do it the way I do it isn't of quality or need. We need it all. I just feel like there is a kind of unevenness now. So my responsibility is to fill in that void of complexity.
mm,
It's like,
mhm,
okay, if we really want to make it, we have to continuously challenge the way that we challenge not just what we believe, but how we believe. Like, how do we create systems of knowledge? So, yeah, I feel like fiction allows me to do that a little more obviously than the poems, where I'm just really asking questions and just trying to explore in a
Yeah,
poem.
yeah, yeah, and without spoiling anything, ours isn't a fairy tale about liberation, it's complex, it's uncomfortable. What
Mhm.
were you trying to say about freedom that maybe we don't always wanna talk about?
That is not easy. It's not
Mm.
easy, and that everybody wants freedom, but they don't know how to be free.
Mm.
You know, there's this idea like, "Oh, yeah, I wanna be free." What does that mean?
Yeah,
And then we talk about responsibility. Being free does not mean you have no responsibilities, right?
yeah.
I think it was Toni Morrison who was like, "It's the right to choose my responsibilities." So we still have
Mm,
to be held accountable by our community, and but there's still a choice that needs to be made. You can't just shrug off utter responsibility. You have to be in the community. You have to be in conversation with other people, with the environment, with your spirit, right? With spirituality. And so I
yeah.
wanted to debunk the idea that freedom is universally understood to be the same thing by all people, and
Mm,
that once it is obtained, that you know what to do with it. I think
mm.
freedom is incredibly dangerous, if we don't consider how we navigate, and how we really build with each other. So I wanted to go there.
Once freedom is obtained, you need to know what to do with it.
You have to know what to do with it.
So good, so good. One thing I appreciate about your writing is how unapologetically it holds identity.
Mm.
Everything from blackness, queerness, body, desire, and you do all of this without making it spectacle or explanation. Did you always give yourself permission to write that way, or was that a journey?
Well, it's definitely a journey, definitely a
Mm,
journey. I had to learn that kind of vulnerability. It didn't
mhm,
I didn't start off with that kind of vulnerability. There
mhm,
there are bits and pieces of evidence in earlier work, like Thief in the Interior has a lot of moments like that. Mutiny has that, but it kind of steers away, I think, from the vulnerable because the shield is up and saying, like, I'm in war now. So here's my
yeah,
sword, here's my shield. And so it's a different way of thinking about language and thinking about how we can use this artwork to claim one space. I
mhm,
say I wrote Thief in the Interior to introduce myself to prove to other people that I could do it. And I wrote Mutiny for myself saying, okay, I see y'all, but this is for me. This is
mm,
for me. And then ours is a kind of combination of both of those ideas, which is that I have to give something to you and I also have to give something to myself.
that's it. And so in a world that constantly tries to box Black artists in, write about trauma, write about joy, write for the market, how do you hold on to your own center?
The answer it's a good answer. It's an Eartha Kitt kind of answer.
Come on, Eartha Kitt.
Well, the thing is that I exist and other people can gravitate to my center or they can be pushed out from their
Mm,
center. I don't have to do any work for that
mm,
to happen. That
yeah.
is all the gravity of spirit.
Mhm,
So
mhm,
whoever can fit into the orbit, whoever can find themselves not burning up in my, in my atmosphere, then welcome home.
yeah,
And then for others, you know, have a safe journey.
right. I love that. How did you get that though? How like, what brought you to that level of understanding, that level of confidence within yourself? How did you get there?
I think it's because I love my work. I
Mm,
love what I do. I love how I do it. And I know that all of this is subjective. I can, write something that is really dope and people like, I don't really rock with that. I was like, "Well,
mhm,
that's fine." I would question their taste, but
mm.
but I mean that's what it is. We're all, here under the whims of people's as artists, we're all here under the whims of people's, desires and hungers and insecurities, and I can't measure all of that. And I
Mhm,
I I learned that very early, that what it is that I like to do and enjoy doing and how I create and what I enjoy reading is not everybody's cup of tea.
yeah,
So, I steep what I steep, and I steep it can be a bitter brew, but it's always a little honey. It's always a little something extra there.
yeah,
But I know that I not everybody has to like what I do. I have to like what I do.
yeah, yeah. So
And as long as I feel as though I'm constantly growing and pushing myself, then that has to sustain me. There's no other way.
yeah. And for the readers who don't necessarily share your identities but connect deeply with your work, what do you hope they take from the worlds you build?
I think in particular with ours, less so with the poems, but with ours, I do open to the idea that people will start to question where they stand when it comes to this idea of being a revolutionary, when it comes to being brave, when it comes to knowing that or feeling that everything that you've worked hard for can easily be taken from you. So how do you
Mhm,
defend from that? So of course this is a racialized historical mythic story that is very particular and specific to a kind of a cultural thinking. But beneath all of that is, can we put action to our words, to our
mhm,
beliefs,
mhm.
especially if we're thinking about now, you know,
Yeah.
when I walk out of the door and if I see harm in my community, do I know what my job is in that?
Mhm,
Am I the warrior? Am I the healer? Am I the strategist? Am I the spy? Can I figure out my place in this
mhm.
freedom? So
Yeah,
that would be great if people could do that.
yeah, yeah. So I love talking craft with writers who care about the work, and you're meticulous in language and silence and in rhythm. What does discipline look like for you? And then what does your writing life actually feel like behind closed doors?
Yeah, I don't write all the time.
Mm,
I try to read more than I write and read across genres. So I'll read a play, I'll read a book of essays, poetry, fiction, scholarly articles, academic articles, just to keep the brain moving and
mhm,
keep new ideas flowing so that I can always be kind of inspired to know what else is going on in the world, but also what has been going on. Because a lot of what we're experiencing now has already been experienced. So we, we're in this cycle of history. Like if we just paid attention to
yeah,
what has happened, and to the patterns of human behavior, we would know that, yeah, this was on its way. We probably would have been able to stop it earlier. So I like to do a lot of reading. I think that is the biggest part of my discipline. The writing comes when I have something to say. I don't always
mhm,
have something to say. I have another
mhm,
book of poetry coming out in July, and the writing of it came very quickly because I hadn't
mhm.
written poems in a long time, but in my mind I was writing so that
Yeah.
by the time I came to the page, they were ready to define their life. But this new novel that I'm thinking through, I have like 12 pages and I've been sitting on that for like a year. So it's going
Mm,
to take a minute. I think the discipline is always being in practice as a person who is in the world, paying attention, observing deeply, having conversations with folks, going to therapy. Yo,
mm, mm. That
yeah,
part.
yeah, yeah.
So when you teach, mentor, or speak with emerging writers, what's the one thing that you want them to know about creating work that lasts?
That they have to take risks, that they
Mm,
have to take risks. If they're comfortable in writing it, then what is a reader supposed to get out of it?
mhm,
I
mhm,
think being comfortable in what we write means that we didn't go deep enough. We didn't go deep enough. There should and this is a general statement, so it's meant to be disagreed with if one wants to. But I do think there's a general sense that if it doesn't feel risky to write, if it doesn't feel as though when you put finger to keyboard or pen to page, that something is coming out of you that you didn't know was in you. If you don't learn something from the process of writing or from the information that you put on the page, the emotions you don't put on the page, then you should try again until that
mm,
happens. So I'm always asking my students this question, like, what is at stake? And it's an obnoxious question in as much as people are like, well, there's nothing, I'm not risking anything by writing this poem.
mhm,
But the way I ask it is not meant to say what is at stake for you, but what is at stake for the people or the person who's populating the work that you're writing. Every
mhm.
poem has at least a single character, which is the speaker, right?
Right.
Why do they have to share what they're sharing at this moment? Why? Why do we need to know this? Why are they telling us? Because a poem is an exchange. So
Yeah.
there's someone we expect to be on the other side of it. Why are they telling me that racism is bad? I know racism is bad. I want to know how their understanding of it has changed something inside of them so that they see the world differently. And then
Wow.
maybe that can help me see the world differently. So it's
Yeah.
more than just, oh, my topics or my themes are really important. We're all going to think that. It's more so, how do you express it in a way that it can change your own life and then maybe even change the way other people view the world and view themselves?
Wow. Wow. And this one's purely curiosity. Do you ever go back to something that you wrote years ago and think, that writer was doing their best, but I've evolved since? Or does everything you write feel like an archive of the self you were?
It's an archive. There are
Mm,
some things that I go back to and I say, "What was I thinking?" And in a positive way, like, how can I
mhm,
get back to that level of ambition?
mm,
There is a way that I think that the more we learn the more comfort does creep in, and so taking chances, it becomes not second nature anymore. Like, the taking chances was a part of the hunger. Like, oh, you're trying to really push yourself and, show that you know what you're doing. Like, you're the boss.
Yeah.
And then the longer you're in it, I think there's a kind of wisdom that comes that can also be a kind of placating. Like, okay, well, maybe I don't have to do that so much, or you start calculating too much.
Mhm.
And I started looking at older work, said, "Oh, I was really playful." I was reaching for something that I'm no longer reaching for, but I still should probably be striving to attain. So I
Yeah.
look at my old work sometimes in awe, you
Love
know?
that. So for someone who's never picked up your work, never read a poem, never touched ours, what
Mhm.
do you want their first encounter with your voice to feel like?
Oh, I don't have any opinion about that. I have no
Mm,
say in that. I have more interest in asking people to come to my work with a certain openness.
mm.
No expectations, just come. And don't be afraid of a dictionary. I like words. I grew up reading the dictionary, just flipping randomly to a page and be like, oh, that's a cool word.
Mhm,
It's not to make anybody feel dumb. And that's the thing that folks really have to understand when you feel like you're less than anything that you're engaging with. That's something you have to solve on your own. And you
mhm.
can't solve it by running away and running to what is easy and what is simple and what is quickly digested. I couldn't always read, period. We couldn't always read, but
Right.
I couldn't always read a lot of the things I read now. And I
Mhm,
just kept doing it over and over again until something clicked. And also, I had people I could ask for help.
mm,
Other poets, like, I don't really understand this poet. What should I be looking for? How can I study this better? Reading up on the work. I couldn't blame the writer for making me feel dumb. Like,
mhm.
the writer's just writing what they're writing. The musicians just making their esoteric sounds, the sounds of their spirit. And it's up to me to come at things minded with open-mindedness and also with a sense of care. You have to be careful with other people's artwork.
Yeah.
You have
So
to be
good.
very careful.
So good. So good. So Philip, thank you so much for joining us today. Tell us how we can stay updated on all that's happening with you.
So I do have a website. It is gonna be remodeled, remastered, whatever. It's philipbwilliams.com. I was lucky enough to get my name as my website. On Instagram, I'm more active. It's philipbw_author. And those are the only ways. And I left Twitter about 2 years ago. Black Planet ain't been around since I was a teenager.
Black Janet.
So yeah, those are the two ways to keep up with what's going on.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, again, thank you. Thank you for bringing your full artistry into the room, for your imagination, for your depth, for your discipline, and for giving us the language that liberates us. This is the Colby Culture Show. I'm Colby. Keep reading, keep listening, and keep making room for stories that refuse silence. I'll see you next time.
Nice.
Peace. Thank you so much for listening. Make sure to follow the show wherever you listen to your podcast. Watch, like, and subscribe on YouTube. And please feel free to give us a 5-star rating. See you on the next one.